Hello, hello, and how is everybody this week? I better get my microphone. Hey, sorry about that, I just realised. And sorry about the big loud noises while I move it. Oh, goodness. Anyone would think that by now I would know what I was doing. Doesn't matter. We're here. We're all here. Hi, those of you who are new, I'm Jev. I read old-fashioned children's stories. The stories that I grew up reading, my parents and my grandparents, we all grew up reading these stories. Why? Because it's nice to have a different headspace to dwell in for a little while, especially in this day and age. There's lots of stuff that goes on at the moment that isn't really the most encouraging and isn't the most relaxing. Sometimes it's a good idea to actually just get out of the world that we're in. And words, stories, books are a great way to do that. So I suppose it's my mission to just share overlooked old-fashioned stories so that other people can appreciate them and enjoy them and have somewhere else to go in their headspace. Anyway, so, yes, I say so a lot, among other things. These are rough reads. I interrupt myself a lot. I make mistakes. I reread something. I get lost sometimes when I'm partway through a sentence because I'm ADHD, among other things. And that's just the way it is. I tend to describe my reading as less audiobooks, more bedtime stories, but you don't have to be going to bed to listen to them. It's fine if you are in the middle of working, doing studies, anything like that, and you just want to have me chatting away in the background. That's cool. I'm not offended by that. In fact, that's a great way to actually just listen to a story and to give your mind something else to do when your hands and your eyes are busy on other things that you have to get done. What else? There was something else I was going to say. There you go, ADHD. I don't chat while I'm reading. I chat in between chapters, unless I think there's something which you may not know about. And so therefore I will probably explain it, because often the authors that we read are so used to the world that they live in, the time that they live in, that they don't necessarily explain everything because it's normal for them. And so if I think it's something like that I'm reading about, but it's something that I understand, I will probably share my understanding of it with you. And also, because I did actually spend a little bit of time living in England a few years back. I live in New Zealand these days. A few years back, there are some things which I've actually had a little bit of experience with because they're specific to being in England that aren't common for those of us who live in other countries such as New Zealand, Australia, Canada, the States, that sort of thing. And so I will quite happily share those with you as well if I think it's relevant to a story, or if I just decide I'm going to tell you that anyway. Hey, tough. If you don't like it, you don't have to watch. I do save my stories from here and put them up on YouTube, here being Twitch. And if you're watching this on YouTube, well then maybe you should look for my Twitch link so you can actually listen to the stories when I read live instead of as a recording. I put my stories as playlists on YouTube, so those who want to listen to a full book from start to finish as a cluster of videos, you're most welcome to do that. The link is below my profile on Twitch. And if you're already on YouTube, go to my videos page or my playlist page, and they will show for you there. If you want to be notified when I go live reading or when I put a new video up on YouTube, then subscribe. If you're on YouTube, hit the notification bell and it will tell you rather than just showing you with an icon. And if you're on Twitch, if you follow me, then that will also make sure that you know when I'm live. You're most welcome to chat, but I probably won't respond until I'm actually in a chapter break. So we start by the reminder, don't forget to grab your drink. Mine's water, but that's just the way it is. It keeps you hydrated, keeps the brain working. So a good idea when you come here to listen is have something to drink, something to eat as a snack, just to keep you going, and somewhere comfortable to sit, unless you have to stand. That's okay too. Anyway, with all of that blether, we shall carry on. And I shall wait for my iPad to open. Oh, yes, I use a first generation iPad mini. It still works for reading books. It's no good for anything else. You can't install apps, you can't update apps. But I can browse the internet to get more digital books to download. And remind me later on to tell you about some other books. You can hear me patting them next to me, just out of sight. But I shall carry on reading the book. We're currently reading 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. We've had other books of hers. Generally, the children find themselves in sticky situations of their own making, of some sort or another. She's written a fairly wide variety. The Railway Children is one of her more famous series. And we've read those. If you want to have a listen to those, then those being the videos from it, then have a look over on YouTube. 5 Children in It. 5 children who have moved from the city out to the country and are living in a house there. I'm not sure if it's the holidays or what. Discover a sand fairy, also known as a Samiad. And that's what this story is about. There are 2 other books that follow on from this one, and we will read them at some stage, but not immediately after this. So we shall carry on with today's reading, which is Chapter 4, Wings. 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. Chapter 4, Wings. I shall carry on. The next day was very wet, too wet to go out, and far too wet to think of disturbing a sand fairy so sensitive to water that he still, after thousands of years, felt the pain of once having his left whisker wetted. It was a long day, and it was not till the afternoon that all the children suddenly decided to write letters to their mother, because currently mother and father are both away, and they obviously have people living at the house looking after them. It was Robert who had the misfortune to upset the inkwell, an unusually deep and full one, straight into that part of Anthea's desk where she had long pretended that an arrangement of mucilage and cardboard painted with India ink was a secret drawer. It was not exactly Robert's fault. It was only his misfortune that he chanced to be lifting the ink across the desk just at the moment when Anthea had got it open, and that same moment should have been the one chosen by the lamb, that's their youngest sibling, a toddler, to get under the table and break his squeaking bird. There was a sharp, convenient wire inside the bird, and of course the lamb ran the wire into Robert's leg at once, and so, without anyone's meaning to do it, the secret drawer was flooded with ink. At the same time, a stream was poured over Anthea's half-finished letter, so that her letter was something like this: "Darling mother, I hope you are quite well, and I hope Granny is better. The other day we... ... Then came a flood of ink, and at the bottom these words in pencil: "It was not me upset the ink, but it took such a time cleaning up, so no more as it is post time, from your loving daughter, Anthea." Obviously, because of it being spilt, they had run out of ink, and so she couldn't write any more, which tells me that they were using dip pens, or quills, which are the earlier version of a dip pen, rather than a fountain pen, and ballpoint pens weren't around then. Robert's letter had not even begun. He had been drawing a ship on the blotting paper while he was trying to think of what to say, and of course after the ink was upset he had to help Anthea to clean out her desk, and he promised to make her another secret drawer better than the other, and she said, "Well, make it now." So it was post time, and his letter wasn't done, and the secret drawer wasn't done either. Cyril wrote a long letter very fast, and then went to set a trap for slugs that he had read about in the Homemade Gardener, and when it was post time the letter could not be found, and it was never found. Perhaps the slugs ate it. Oh dear. Jane's letter was the only one that went. She meant to tell her mother all about the Samiad, In fact, they had all meant to do this, but she spent so long thinking how to spell the word that there was no time to tell the story properly, and it is useless to tell a story unless you do tell it properly, and so she had to be contented with this. My dear mother, dear, we are all as good as can be, like you told us to, and the lamb has a little cold, but Martha says it is nothing, only he upset the goldfish into himself yesterday morning. When we were up at the sand pit the other day, we went round by the Safeway where the carts go, and we found half an hour went by before Jane felt quite sure that they could none of them spell Samiad, and they could not find it in the dictionary either, though they looked. Then Jane hastily finished the letter. We found a strange thing, but it is nearly post time, so no more at present. From your little girl, Jane. P.S. If you could have a wish come true, what would you have? And just so you know, Samiad, P-S-A-M-M-E-A-D, in case you have to find it, to write down, because it won't be in the dictionary, I think. Then the postman was heard blowing his horn, and Robert rushed out into the rain to stop his cart and give him the letters. And that was how it happened that, though all the children meant to tell their mother about the sand fairy, somehow or other she never got to know. There were other reasons why she never got to know, but these come later. The next day Uncle Richard came and took them all to Maidstone in a wagonette, all except the lamb. Uncle Richard was the very best kind of uncle. He bought them toys at Maidstone. He took them into a shop and let them all choose exactly what they wanted, without any restrictions about price and no nonsense about things being instructive. It is very wise to let children choose exactly what they like, because they are very foolish and inexperienced, and sometimes they will choose a really instructive thing without meaning to do so. This happened to Robert, who chose at the last moment, and in a great hurry, a box with pictures on it of winged bulls with men's heads and winged men with eagles' heads. He thought there would be animals inside, same as on the box. When he got it home, it was a Sunday puzzle about ancient Nineveh. The others chose in haste and were happy at leisure. Cyril had a model engine, and the girls had 2 dolls, as well as a china tea set with forget-me-nots on it, to be between them. In other words, a shared gift. The boys between them was bow and arrow. Then Uncle Richard took them on the beautiful Medway, which is a river, in a boat. Then they all had tea at a beautiful confectioner's, and when they reached home it was far too late to have any wishes that day. They're allowed 1 wish per day from the Samiad. They did not tell Uncle Richard anything about the Samiad. I do not know why, and they do not know why, but I dare say you can guess. The day after Uncle Richard had behaved so handsomely was a very hot day indeed. The people who decide what the weather is to be and put its orders down for it in the newspapers every morning said afterwards that it was the hottest day there had been for years. They had ordered it to be warmer, some showers, and warmer it certainly was. In fact, it was so busy being warmer that it had no time to attend to the order about showers, so there weren't any. Have you ever been up at 5 o'clock on a fine summer morning? It is very beautiful. The sunlight is pinky and yellowy, and all the grass and trees are covered in dew diamonds, and all the shadows go the opposite way to the way they do in the evening, which is very interesting and makes you feel as though you're in a new, other world. Anthea woke at 5. She had made herself wake, and I must tell you how it is done, even if it keeps you waiting for the story to go on. And I'm going to keep you waiting even longer because I'm going to move my chair. It has a tendency to roll backwards, so I try and roll sideways, forwards, and then sideways again, so that the wheels are facing this way, not that way, and then it won't roll backwards. It will kind of stop. Anyway, we'll carry on. Just need to reload a page. And here we go. That's right, it was Anthea waking up early. She has a special technique. You get into bed at night and lie down quite flat on your little back with your hands straight down by your sides. Then you say, I must wake up at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or whatever the time is that you want. And you say it, and as you say it, you push your chin down on your chest and then whack your head back on the pillow. And you do this as many times as there are ones in the time you want to wake up at. It is quite an easy sum. Of course, everything depends on your really wanting to get up at 5 or 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. If you don't really want to, it's all of no use. But if you do, well, try it and see. Of course, in this, as in doing Latin proses or getting into mischief, practice makes perfect. Oh, getting into mischief takes practice. That's a new way of looking at it. Anthea was quite perfect in her wanting to wake up early. At the very moment when she opened her eyes, she heard the black and gold clock down in the dining room strike 11. So she knew it was 3 minutes to 5. The black and gold clock always struck wrong, but it was all right when you knew what it meant. It was like a person talking a foreign language. If you know the language, it is just as easy to understand as English. And Anthea knew the clock language. She was very sleepy, but she jumped out of bed, put her face and hands into a basin of cold water. This is a fairy charm that prevents you wanting to get back into bed again. Then she dressed and folded up her nightdress. She did not tumble it together by the sleeves, but folded it by the seams from the hem, and that will show you the kind of well-brought-up little girl she is. Then she took her shoes in her hand and crept softly down the stairs. She opened the dining room window and climbed out. It would have been just as easy to go out by the door, but the window was more romantic and less likely to be noticed by Martha. I will always get up at 5, she said to herself. It was quite too awfully pretty for anything. Her heart was beating very fast, for she was carrying out a plan quite her own. She could not be sure that it was a good plan, but she was quite sure that it would not be any better if she were to tell the others about it. Intriguing. At least I'm intrigued. I don't know about you. And she had a feeling that, right or wrong, she would rather go through with it alone. She put on her shoes under the iron veranda on the red and yellow shining tiles, and then she ran straight to the sandpit and found the Samoyed's place and dug it out. It was very cross indeed. It's too bad, it said, fluffing up its fur as pigeons do their feathers at Christmas time. The weather's Arctic, and it's the middle of the night. I'm so sorry, said Anthea gently, and she took off her white pinafore and covered the sand fairy up with it, all but its head, its bat's ears, and its eyes that were like snails' eyes. She's trying to keep it warm because it said the weather was Arctic. Thank you, it said. That's better. What's the wish this morning? I just want to do something, so I'm trying to get ready for when there's pictures coming up, and I forgot to do that. So I'm just going to do that now. Just hang on a moment. Chat amongst yourselves, as we used to be told. Hopefully I've found the right version of it. Looks like the illustrated one. Yes. That looks like it. Yay. We haven't quite got there, but nearly. Sorry, I would have done this earlier if I'd remembered. I'm not very good at that sort of thing, remembering. Right, here we go. Carrying on. Thank you, it said. That's better. What's the wish this morning? I don't know, she said. That's just it. You see, we've been very unlucky so far. I wanted to talk to you about it, but would you mind not giving me any wishes until after breakfast? It's so hard to talk to anyone if they jump out at you with wishes you don't really want. Yes, because that's one of the things that's happened is somebody actually just leaps in and says, I wish this. Not remembering that casually saying that gets them the wish that they've just said. You shouldn't say you wish for things if you don't wish for them, said the Samoyed. In the old days, people almost always knew whether it was a megatherium or ichthyosaurus they really wanted for dinner. That's what people used to, in prehistoric times, apparently wish for, a meal. I'll try not to do so, said Anthea, but I do wish. Look out, said the Samoyed in a warning voice, and it began to blow itself out. Oh, this isn't a magic wish, it's just, I should be so glad if you did not swell yourself out and nearly burst to give me anything just now. Wait till the others are here. Well, well, it said indulgently, but it shivered. Would you, asked Anthea kindly, would you like to come and sit on my lap? You'd be warmer, and I could turn the skirt of my frock up around you. I'd be very careful. Anthea had never expected that it would, but it did. Thank you, it said. You really are rather thoughtful. It crept onto her lap and snuggled down, and she put her arms round it with a rather frightened gentleness. She's being very cautious. Sorry. Itchy ribs. Now then, it said. Well then, said Anthea, everything we have wished has turned out rather horrid. I wish you would advise us. You are so old you must be very wise. I was always generous from a child, said the Sand Fairy. I've spent the whole of my waking hours in giving, but one thing I won't give, that's advice. You see, Anthea went on, it's such a wonderful thing, such a splendid, glorious chance. It's so good and kind and dear of you to give us our wishes, and it seems such a pity it should all be wasted, just because we are too silly to know what to wish for. Anthea had meant to say that, and she had not wanted to say it before the others. It's one thing to say you're silly, and quite another to say that other people are. Child, said the Sand Fairy sleepily, I can only advise you to think before you speak. But I thought you never gave advice. That piece doesn't count, it said. You'll never take it. Besides, it's not original. It's all in the copybooks. But won't you just say if you think wings would be a silly wish? Wings, it said. I should think you might do worse, only take care you aren't flying high at sunset. Because the wishes finish at sunset. That's what that's reference to. There was a little Ninevite boy I heard of once. He was one of King Sennacherib's sons, and a traveller brought him a Samoyed. He used to keep it in a box of sand on the palace terrace. It was a dreadful degradation for one of us, of course. Still, the boy was the Assyrian king's son, and one day he wished for wings and got them, but he forgot that they would turn into stone at sunset. And when they did, he fell onto one of the winged lions at the top of his father's great staircase, and what with his stone wings and the lion's stone wings, well, it's not a very pretty story. But I believe the boy enjoyed himself very much till then. Tell me, said Anthea, why don't our wishes turn into stone now? Why do they just vanish? Ultra temps, ultra mors, said the creature. Is that the Ninevite language? Asked Anthea, who had learned no foreign language at school except French. Except that I think that looks to me like French. Maybe it's Latin. Sorry. What I mean is, the Samoyed went on, that in the old days people wished for good solid everyday gifts, mammoths and pterodactyls and things, and those could be turned into stone as easy as not. But people wish such high-flying, fanciful things nowadays. How are you going to turn being beautiful as the day, or being wanted by everybody, into stone? That's a good question. You see, it can't be done, and it would never do to have two rules, so they simply vanish. If being beautiful as the day could be turned into stone, it would last an awfully long time, you know. Much longer than you would. Just look at the Greek statues. It's just as well as it is. Goodbye. I am so sleepy. It jumped off her lap, dug frantically, and vanished. Anthea was late for breakfast. It was Robert who quietly poured a spoonful of molasses down the lamb's frock so that he had to be taken away and washed thoroughly directly after breakfast. And it was, of course, a very naughty thing to do. Yet it served two purposes. It delighted the lamb, who loved above all things to be completely sticky, and it engaged Martha's attention so that the others could slip away to the sandpit without the lamb. They did it, and in the lane, Anthea, breathless from the hurry of that slipping, panted out, "I want to propose we take turns to wish, only nobody's to have a wish if the others don't think it's a nice wish. Do you agree?" "Who's to have first wish?" asked Robert cautiously. "Me, if you don't mind," said Anthea apologetically. "And I've thought about it, and it's wings." There was a silence. The others rather wanted to find fault, but it was hard because the word wings raised a flutter of joyous excitement in every breast. "Not so dusty," said Cyril generously, and Robert added, "Really, Panther, you're not quite such a fool as you look." Panther is Anthea's nickname. Jane said, "I think it would be perfectly lovely. It's like a bright dream of delirium." They found the sand fairy easily. Anthea said, "I wish we all had beautiful wings to fly with." The sand fairy blew himself out, and next moment each child felt a funny feeling, half heaviness and half lightness on its shoulders. The Samiad put its head on one side and turned its snail eyes from one side to the other. I'm just going to show you the picture. There you go. There's the sand, that's the Samiad blowing itself out. It inflates itself like this, but with its body. And then there's the children up there watching it. You can see it's got the eyes on top like snails have. Right, carrying on. "Not so bad," it said dreamily, "but really, Robert, you're not quite such an angel as you look." Robert almost blushed. The wings were very big and more beautiful than you can possibly imagine, for they were soft and smooth, and every feather lay neatly in its place, and the feathers were of the most lovely mixed changing colours, like the rainbow or iridescent glass, or the beautiful scum that sometimes floats on water that is not at all nice to drink. I think that's oil or something else like that. "Oh, but how can we fly?" Jane said, standing anxiously first on one foot and then on the other. "Look out," said Cyril, "you're treading on my wing." "Does it hurt?" asked Anthea with interest. But no one answered, for Robert had spread his wings and jumped up, and now he was slowly rising in the air. He looked very awkward in his knickerbocker suit. His boots in particular hung helplessly and seemed much larger than when he was standing in them. But the others cared but little how he looked, or how they looked for that matter, for now they all spread out their wings and rose in the air. Of course, you all know what flying feels like because everyone has dreamed about flying, and it seems so beautifully easy, only you can never remember how you did it. And as a rule, you have to do it without wings in your dreams, which is more clever and uncommon, but not so easy to remember the rule for. Now the 4 children rose, flapping from the ground, and you can't think how good the air felt as it ran against their faces. Their wings were tremendously wide when they were spread out, and they had to fly quite a long way apart so as not to get in each other's way. But little things like this are easily learned. All the words in the English dictionary and in the Greek lexicon are I find, of no use at all to tell you exactly what it feels like to be flying, so I will not try. But I will say that to look down on the fields and woods instead of along at them is something like looking at a beautiful live map, where instead of silly colours on paper, you have real moving sunny woods and green fields laid out one after the other. As Cyril said, and I can't think where he got hold of such a strange expression, It does you a fair treat. It was the most wonderful and most like real magic. Was most wonderful and more like real magic than any wish the children had had yet. They flapped and flew and sailed on their great rainbow wings between green earth and blue sky. And they flew over Rochester and then swerved round towards Maidstone, and presently they all began to feel extremely hungry. Curiously enough, this happened when they were flying rather low, and just as they were crossing an orchard where some early plums shone red and ripe. I'm just going to give you that picture. Sorry. I'm not quite as organised today, am I? I'm trying to get it so I don't have to have a huge, great queue of pictures stocked up on my hard drive, but I can actually just access them from online, which is so far, last time and this time, it actually worked out. It's just that it's a little bit different to what you expect. And there you go. That's not them over the orchard. That's them over... they flew over Rochester. That's the caption on that picture. So that's probably Rochester Cathedral there that they taught, that the description is about. Some of these books I can tap on the picture and it makes it bigger for me, and other ones I can't. And it's quite disappointing that I can't on this one. Anyway, so Rochester and Maidstone, they're down in Kent. Rochester is, you've got on the map of England, it goes down like this. The toe of Kent goes like this, and this bit up here goes in towards the River Thames and London, and you come down this coast here, and then it comes across the bottom with the English Channel. So Rochester is part way along where it widens out from where the river is in the estuary for the River Thames. And Rochester is up nearer to that end, and Maidstone is further down towards that toe. Anyway, we'll carry on. They paused on their wings. I cannot explain to you how this was done, but it is something like treading water when you are swimming, and hawks do it extremely well. So that would be what we these days call gliding. There you go, gliding. I'm just having a preview of what pictures are coming up in case I have to do anything more. Sorry. Okay, and copying the link so I've got it ready to go. Trying. They paused on their wings. Oh yes, we've had that. That's about gliding. Yes, I dare say, said Cyril, though no one had spoken, but stealing is stealing even if you've got wings. Good point. So not helping ourselves to somebody else's fruit in their orchard. Do you really think so? Said Jane briskly. If you've got wings, you're a bird, and no one minds birds breaking the commandments. At least they may mind, but the birds always do it, and no one scolds them or sends them to prison. It was not so easy to perch on a plum tree as you might think, because the rainbow wings were so very large. But somehow they all managed to do it, and the plums were certainly very sweet and juicy. Fortunately, it was not till they had all had quite as many plums as were good for them that they saw a stout man who looked exactly as though he owned the plum trees come hurrying through the orchard gate with a thick stick, and with one accord they disentangled their wings from the plum-laden branches and began to fly. I would say he just thought there were children stealing his plums until they started flying. The man stopped short, with his mouth open, for he had seen the boughs of his trees moving and twitching, and he had said to himself, "Them young varmint, at it again!" And he had come out at once, for the lads of the village had taught him in past seasons that plums want looking after, otherwise they pinch them. But when he saw the rainbow wings flutter up and out of the plum tree, he felt that he must have gone quite mad, and he did not like the feeling at all. And when Anthea looked down and saw his mouth go slowly open and stay so, and his face become green and mauve in patches, she called out, "Don't be frightened," and felt hastily in her pocket for a threepenny bit with a hole in it, which she had meant to hang on a ribbon round her neck for luck. She hovered round the unfortunate plum owner and said, "We have had some of your plums. We thought it wasn't stealing, but now I am not so sure. So here's some money to pay for them." She swooped down towards the terror-stricken grower of plums and slipped the coin into the pocket of his jacket, and in a few flaps she had rejoined the others. The farmer sat down on the grass, suddenly and heavily. And that's what he's doing right there. He's suddenly sitting down on the grass. And there she is, flying off. There's a plum tree in the background. "Well, I'm blessed," he said. "This here is what they call delusions, I suppose. But this here threepenny," he'd pulled it out and bitten it, "that's real enough." Just turn the picture on. "Well, from this day forth I'll be a better man. It's the kind of thing to sober a chap for life, this is. I'm glad it was only wings, though. I'd rather see the birds as aren't there and couldn't be, even if they pretend to talk, than some things as I could name." He got up slowly and heavily and went indoors, and he was so nice to his wife that day that she felt quite happy, and said to herself, "Lor, whatever have a come to the man," and smartened herself up and put a blue ribbon bow at the place where her collar fastened on, and looked so pretty that he was kinder than ever. So perhaps the winged children really did do one good thing that day. If so, it was the only one, for really there is nothing like wings for getting you into trouble. But on the other hand, if you are in trouble, there is nothing like wings for getting you out of it. This was the case in the matter of the fierce dog who sprang out at them when they had folded up their wings as small as possible and were going up to a farm door to ask for a crust of bread and cheese, for in spite of the plums, they were soon just as hungry as ever again. Have you ever noticed that? If you're eating lots of fruit, it's very satisfying at the time, but it doesn't stay with you and stop you feeling hungry as much as, say, something that has a little bit of fat and a bit of protein and a bit less of fruit acid, maybe a little bit of carbohydrates like bread and butter, that sort of thing. Yes, I can imagine they would have got quite hungry eventually. Sorry, I have an itchy knee. We shall carry on. Now there is no doubt whatever that if the four had been ordinary wingless children, the black and fierce dog would have had a good bite out of the brown-stockinged leg of Robert, who was the nearest. But at its first growl there was a flutter of wings, and the dog was left to strain at his chain and stand on his hind legs as if he were trying to fly too. They tried several other farms, but at those where there were no dogs, the people were far too frightened to do anything but scream, and at last, when it was nearly 4 o'clock, and their wings were getting miserably stiff and tired, and they alighted on a church tower and held a council of war. "We can't possibly fly all the way home without dinner or tea," said Robert with desperate decision. They are finding it a little hard, aren't they? Sorry. I'm trying to get this set up ready because I'm pretty sure you've got another picture coming. I can't tell until I turn over the page. Anyway, there you go. "We can't possibly fly all the way home without dinner or tea," said Robert with desperate decision. "And nobody will give us any dinner or even lunch, let alone tea," said Cyril. Tea being afternoon tea. In New Zealand, dinner and tea are the same thing. "Perhaps the clergyman here might," suggested Anthea. "He must know all about angels." "Anybody could see we're not that," said Jane. "Look at Robert's boots and Squirrel's plaid necktie." Squirrel is Cyril. Well, said Cyril firmly, if the country you're in won't sell provisions, you take them. In wars, I mean. I'm quite certain you do, and even in other stories, no good brother would allow his little sisters to starve in the midst of plenty. Plenty, said Robert hungrily, and the others looked vaguely round the bare leads of the church tower. That's the lead-covered roof of a church tower is called the leads. Lead is used because it can be shaped more easily than most other metals and soldered together to join, and so therefore it's a good way to fit against odd shapes that you get on stone buildings. Plenty, repeated Robert hungrily, and the others looked vaguely round the bare leads of the church tower and murmured, in the midst of plenty. Yes, said Cyril impressively. There is a larder window at the side of the clergyman's house, and I saw things to eat inside. Custard pudding and cold chicken and tongue and pies and jam. It's rather a high window, but with wings. How clever of you, said Jane. Not at all, said Cyril modestly. Any born general, Napoleon or the Duke of Wellington, the Duke of Marlborough, would have seen it just the same as I did. It seems very wrong, said Anthea. Nonsense, said Cyril. What was it Sir Philip Sidney said when the soldier wouldn't give him a drink? My necessity is greater than his. We'll club together our money, though, and leave it to pay for the things, won't we? Said Anthea. She was persuasive and very nearly in tears, because it was the most trying to feel enormously hungry and unspeakably sinful at one and the same time. Some of it, was the cautious reply. Everyone now turned out its pockets on the lead roof of the tower, where visitors for the last 150 years had cut their own and their sweethearts' initials with penknives in the soft lead. There was 5 and 7pence halfpenny altogether. 5 shillings, 7 pence and halfpenny. And even the upright Anthea admitted that was too much to pay for the 4 people's dinners. Robert said he thought 18pence. And here's your picture of them up on the roof. There you go. They're all counting out the money for how much they've got and what they're going to do. I like that illustration. That's lovely. And half a crown was finally agreed to be handsome. So Anthea wrote on the back of her last term's report, which happened to be in her pocket, and from which she tore her own name and that of the school. I was just wondering about that. The following letter is what she wrote. Dear Reverend Clergyman, we are very hungry indeed because of having to fly all day, and we think it is not stealing when you are starving to death. We are afraid to ask you for fear you should say no, because of course you know about angels, but you would not think we were angels. We will only take the necessities of life, and no pudding or pie, to show you it is not greediness, but true starvation that makes us make your larder stand and deliver. But we are not highwaymen by trade. Cut it short, said the others with one accord, and Anthea hastily added, Our intentions are quite honourable, if you only knew, and here is half a crown to show we are sincere and grateful. So greediness is spelt with one E, greediness, and sincere is spelt Sinceer. And here is half a crown to show you we are sincere and grateful. Thank you for your kind hospitality. From us 4. The half-crown was wrapped in this letter, and all the children felt that when the clergyman had read it, he would understand everything as well as anyone who had not seen the wings. Now, said Cyril, of course there's some risk. We'd better fly straight down to the other side of the tower, and then flutter low across the churchyard and in through the shrubbery. There doesn't seem to be anyone about, but you never know. The window looks out into the shrubbery. It is embowered in foliage, like a window in a story. I'll go in and get the things. Robert and Anthea can take them as I hand them out through the window, and Jane can keep watch. Her eyes are sharp, and whistle if she sees anyone about. Shut up, Robert. She can whistle quite well enough for that, anyway. Because Robert was going to say she can't whistle very well. It ought not to be a very good whistle. It'll sound more natural and bird-like. Now then, off we go. I cannot pretend that stealing is right. I can only say that on this occasion it did not look like stealing to the hungry four. But appeared in the light of a fair and reasonable business transaction. Sorry, just trying to do this again. A fair and reasonable business transaction. They had never happened to learn that a tongue, hardly cut into, a chicken and a half, a loaf of bread, and a siphon of soda water cannot be bought in the stores for £0.50. These were the necessaries of life which Cyril handed out the larder window when, quite unobserved and without hindrance or adventure, he had led the others to that happy spot. He felt that to refrain from jam, apple pie, cake, and mixed candied peel was a really heroic act, and I agree with him. He was also proud of not taking the custard pudding, and there I think he was wrong. We'll find out why in a minute, why the author thinks that. Because if he had taken it, there would have been a difficulty about returning the dish. No one, however starving, has a right to steal china pie dishes with little pink flowers on them. The soda water siphon was different. They could not do without something to drink, and as the maker's name was on it, they felt sure it would be returned to him, wherever they might leave it. If they had time, they would take it back themselves. The man appeared to live in Rochester, which would not be much out of their way home. So obviously soda siphons were something that were exchanged for it to them to think about it being returned. And here is your picture. Hopefully I got the right. Yes, I got the right one. You've got Robert inside handing things out, and there's Cyril, and I'm guessing that is Anthea because Jane is keeping an eye out in case someone is spotted. Everything was carried up to the top of the tower and laid down on a sheet of kitchen paper which Cyril had found on the top shelf of the larder. As he unfolded it, Anthea said, "I don't think that's a necessity of life." Let's find out. Will we? Yeah, let's find out. Sorry, I will get faster at doing this. "Yes, it is," said he. "We must put things down somewhere to cut them up. And I heard father say the other day that people got diseases from Germans in rainwater." Germans. "Now there must be lots of rainwater here, and when it dries up the Germans are left, and they'd get into the things and we should all die of scarlet fever." Not quite how illness works, but okay, whatever. "What are Germans?" "Little waggly things you see with microscopes," said Cyril with a scientific air. "They give you every illness you can think of. I'm sure the paper was a necessary just as much as the bread and meat and water. Now then." "Oh, I am hungry." I do not wish to describe the picnic party on the top of the tower. You can imagine well enough what it is like to carve a chicken and a tongue with a knife that has only one blade, and that snapped off short about halfway down. But it was done, so that's like a pocket knife. Eating with your fingers is greasy and difficult, and paper dishes soon get to look very spotty and horrid. But one thing you can't imagine, and that is how soda water behaves when you try to drink it straight out of a siphon, especially a quite full one. But if imagination will not help you, experience will, and you can easily try it for yourself if you get a grown-up to give you the siphon. If you want to have a really thorough experience, put the tube in your mouth and press the handle very suddenly and very hard. You had better do it when you are alone, and out of doors is best for this experiment. Yeah, it's like as if you've shaken up a bottle of fizzy drink, and then if you are able to take the lid off while it's in your mouth, That's what's happening. However you eat them, tongue and chicken and new bread are very good things, and no one minds being sprinkled a little with soda water on a really fine hot day. So that everyone enjoyed the dinner very much indeed, and everyone ate as much as it possibly could, first because it was extremely hungry, and secondly because, as I said, tongue and chicken and new bread are very nice. Now, I dare say you will have noticed that if you have to wait for your dinner till long after the proper time, and then eat a great deal more dinner than usual, and sit in the hot sun on the top of a church tower, or anywhere else, you become soon and strangely sleepy. Now, Anthea and Jane and Cyril and Robert were very like you in many ways, and when they had eaten all they could and drunk all there was, they became sleepy, and strangely and soon, especially Anthea, because she had gotten up so early. One by one they left off talking and leaned back, and before it was a quarter of an hour after dinner, they had all curled round and tucked themselves up under their large, soft, warm wings, and were fast asleep. And the sun was sinking slowly in the west. I'm just going to give you a picture. Yes, there you go. They're all scattered on the rooftop, under their wings, snoozing. We can imagine what's going to happen, can't we? We'll carry on. Oh dear. So much possible trouble. I must say it was in the west, because it is usual in books to say so, for fear careless people should think it was setting in the east. In point of fact, it was not exactly in the west either, but that's near enough. Yeah, because it changes depending on the season. The sun, I repeat, was sinking slowly in the west, and the children slept warmly and happily on, for wings are cosier than eider-down quilts to sleep under. The shadow of the church tower fell across the churchyard, and across the vicarage, and across the field beyond, and presently there were no more shadows, and the sun had set. And the wings were gone, and still the children slept, but not for long. Twilight is very beautiful, but it is chilly, and you know, however sleepy you are, you wake up soon enough if your brother or sister happens to be up first and pulls your blankets off you. The 4 wingless children shivered and woke, and there they were on top of a church tower in the dusky twilight, with blue stars coming out by 1s and 2s and 10s and 20s over their heads, miles away from home, with 3 shillings and 3 halfpence in their pockets, and a doubtful act about the necessities of life to be accounted for if anyone found them, with the soda water siphon. They looked at each other. Cyril spoke first, picking up the siphon. "We'd better get along down and get rid of this beastly thing. It's dark enough to leave it on the clergyman's doorstep, I should think. Come on." There was a little turret at the corner of the tower, and the little turret had a door in it. They had noticed this when they were eating, but had not explored it, as you would have done in their place. Because, of course, when you have wings and can explore the whole sky, doors seem hardly worth exploring. Now they turned towards it. "Of course," said Cyril, "this is the way down." It was, but the door was locked on the inside, and the world was growing darker and darker, and they were miles from home, and there was the soda water siphon. I shall not tell you whether anyone cried, nor if so how many cried, nor who cried. You will be better employed in making up your minds what you would have done if you had been in their place. And that is the end of that chapter. So I'm going to have a drink of water. I invite you to as well. Such A rascally bunch of kids. Oh dear. Sorry, I'm just, while I am in my little break, I'm just getting set up for the next set of pictures. I think. Here we go. And I shall have something to eat. Have you got anything to eat? I hope you have. I hope you're not sitting there starving hungry, having listened to all that wonderful description about the food that they were eating. I'm eating some crackers, and that's quite rattly for you. Really noisy. I can see it on my sound meter. Oh, I told you I had some extra things to show you. So I have some other books. They are physical, real, solid, actual pages type books. Old ones that I found the other day down at my mum and dad's place. And not so much this one. I don't remember that one specifically, but this one and this one I remember really well. This is one that I was hoping to find, but I didn't expect to be able to. And this one I had actually forgotten about. This one is J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan and Wendy, Retold for Little People. Now this is a great way to hear it, because Peter Pan and the story of Peter Pan is quite a long one, and probably a little bit long for us, but I might be able to read it from this one. But I remember these illustrations, so obviously this is one of the versions I've read when I was younger. It's illustrated by Mabel Lucy Atwell, and I remember books of her illustrations. There you go. I don't know if any of you recognise the style of that illustration, but I do. This is what it says on the front page. J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan and Wendy, retold by May Byron for little people, with the approval of the author. Pictures by Mabel Lucy Atwell. Isn't that good? And there's also a really neat note in the very beginning. Do you know that this book is part of the J.M. Barrie Peter Pan bequest? This means that Sir J.M. Barrie's royalty on this book, that means money that he would have made, goes to help the doctors and nurses to cure the children who are lying ill in the Great Ormond Street Hospital for Sick Children in London. Did you know that? That is really cool. So he made a decision that he was going to give the profits from the book to the hospital. I'm just turning the pages to see if I can find any. I remember this picture. I think that's Peter Pan asleep outside a hut. And there's little fairies all around. And then this one is by the same lady we had our previous book from, Edith House. Now, The Sun's Babies was, for me personally, a little bit of a disappointment. I was expecting something that was a bit more story and a bit less short story. This one is The Dream Girl's Garden by Edith House, and it's a little hard to see the illustration on the front cover because it's not a particularly clear one. I'll see if I can find the reprint of it in here. It is in here somewhere. I remember seeing it. I think there was one more illustration that wasn't listed. No, I can't find it at the moment. I'll show it to you when I finally read it. But this one's actually a chapter book. And it's got thick, thick pages. And it's got a few illustrations in it. And it's about this girl and her adventures in her own garden. And it's very much an imagination type story. And that seems to be the style of what Edith House wrote for books. Go on, eat your snacks. and then I shall carry on reading Crunchy Crackers. Yum. Yes, I could have turned the microphone off, but then you wouldn't have been made hungry by the smell of the crunchy crackers. So, Chapter 5, No Wings. I'm reading 5 Children and It by E. Nesbit. And this is Chapter 5, No Wings. Whether anyone cried or not, it was certainly an interval during which none of the party was quite itself. When they grew calmer, Anthea put her handkerchief in her pocket and her arm round Jane and said, "It can't be for more than one night. We can signal with our handkerchiefs in the morning. They'll be dry then, and someone will come up and let us out." "And find the siphon," said Cyril gloomily, "and we shall be sent to prison for stealing." "You said it wasn't stealing. You said you were sure it wasn't." "I'm not so sure now," said Cyril shortly. "Let's throw the thing away among the trees," said Robert. "Then no one can do anything to us." "Oh, yes," Cyril's laugh was not a light-hearted one, "and hit some chap on the head and be murderers as well as the other thing." "But we can't stay up here all night," said Jane, "and I want my tea." "You can't want your tea," said Robert. "You've only just had your dinner." "But I do want it," she said, "especially when you begin talking about stopping up here all night. Oh, Panther, I want to go home. I want to go home." Panther's the nickname for Anthea. "Hush, hush," said Anthea. "Don't, dear. It'll be all right somehow. Don't. Let her cry," said Robert desperately. "If she howls loud enough, someone may hear and come and let us out." "And see the soda water thing," said Anthea swiftly. "Robert, don't be a brute. Oh, Jane, do try to be a man. It's just the same for all of us." Jane did try to be a man. That was the way they used to phrase it. And reduced her howls to sniffs. There was a pause. Then Cyril said slowly, "Look here, we must risk that siphon. I'll button it up inside my jacket. Perhaps no one will notice it. You others keep well in front of me. There are lights in the clergyman's house. They've not gone to bed yet. We must just yell as loud as ever we can. Now all scream when I say 3. Robert, you can do the yell like a railway engine, and I'll do the cooee like father's. The girls can do as they please. 1, 2, 3. A 4-fold yell rent the silent peace of the evening, and a maid at one of the vicarage windows paused with her hand on the blind cord. 1, 2, 3. Another yell, piercing and complex, startled the owls and starlings to a flutter of feathers in the belfry below. The maid flew from the vicarage window and ran down the vicarage stairs and into the vicarage kitchen and fainted as soon as she explained to the manservant and the cook's cousin that she had seen a ghost. It was quite untrue, of course, but I suppose the girls' nerves were a little upset by the yelling. 1, 2, 3. The vicar was on his doorstep by this time, and there was no mistaking the yell that greeted him. "Goodness me," he said to his wife. "My dear, someone's being murdered in the church." "Give me my hat and a thick stick and tell Andrew to come after me. I expect it's the lunatic who stole the tongue." The children had seen the flash of light when the vicar opened his front door. They had seen his dark form on his doorstep, and they had paused for breath and also to see what he would do. When he turned back for his hat, Cyril said hastily, "He thinks he only fancied he heard something. You don't half yell." "Now, 1, 2, 3. It was certainly a whole yell this time, and the vicar's wife flung her arms round her husband and screamed a feeble echo of it. "You shan't go," she said, "not alone. Jessie!" The maid unfainted and came out of the kitchen. "Send Andrew at once. There's a dangerous lunatic in the church, and he must go immediately and catch him." "I expect he will catch it too," said Jessie to herself as she went through the kitchen door. "Here, Andrew," she said, "there's someone screaming like mad in the church, and the missus says you're to go along and catch it." "Not alone, I don't," said Andrew in low, firm tones. To his master he merely said, "Yes, sir." "You heard those screams?" "I did think I noticed a sort of something," said Andrew. "Well, come on then," said the vicar. "My dear, I must go." He pushed her gently into the sitting room, banged the door, and rushed out, dragging Andrew by the arm. A volley of yells greeted him. Then, as it died into silence, Andrew shouted, Hello, you there. Did you call? Yes, shouted 4 faraway voices. They seemed to be in the air, said the vicar. Very remarkable. Where are you? Shouted Andrew, and Cyril replied in his deepest voice, very slow and loud. Church, tower, top. Come down then, said Andrew, and the same voice replied, Can't, door, locked. My goodness, said the vicar. Andrew, fetch the stable lantern. Perhaps it would be as well to fetch another man from the village. With the rest of the gang about, very likely. No, sir, if this here ain't a trap. Well, may I never. There's Cook's cousin at the back door now. He's a keeper, sir, and used to dealing with vicious characters, and he's got his gun, sir. Hello there, shouted Cyril from the church tower. Come up and let us out. We're a-comin', said Andrew. I'm a-goin' to get a policeman and a gun. Andrew, said the vicar, that's not the truth. Oh, so that's what he called out to them. It's near enough, sir, for the likes of them. So Andrew fetched the lantern and the cook's cousin, and the vicar's wife begged them all to be very careful. I'm just checking, hang on, to see where I got up to with the pictures, because we haven't had another one yet. Oh, yeah, okay. Right, I've got it ready, the right one. The vicar's wife begged them all to be very careful. They went across the churchyard. It was quite dark now, and as they went, they talked. The vicar was certain a lunatic was on the church tower, the one who had written the mad letter and taken the cold tongue and things. Andrew thought it was a trap. The cook's cousin alone was calm. Great cry, little wool, said he. Dangerous chaps is quieter. He was not at all afraid, but then he had a gun. That was why he was asked to lead the way up the worn, steep, dark steps of the church tower. He did lead the way, with the lantern in one hand and the gun in the other. Andrew went next. He pretended afterwards that this was because he was braver than his master, but really it was because he thought of traps, and he did not like the idea of being behind the others, for fear someone should come softly up behind him and catch hold of his legs in the dark. They went on, and round the little corkscrew staircase, then through the bell-ringer's loft where the bell ropes hung with soft furry ends like giant caterpillars, then up another stair into the belfry where the big quiet bells are, then on up a ladder with broad steps, and then up a little stone stair. And at the top of that there was a little door, and the door was bolted on the stair side. The cook's cousin, who was a gamekeeper, kicked at the door and said, "Hello, you there!" Children were holding on to each other on the other side of the door and trembling with anxiousness and very hoarse with their howls. They could hardly speak, but Cyril managed to reply huskily, "Hello, you there? How did you get up here?" There was no use saying we flew up, so Cyril said, "We got up, and then we found the door was locked and we couldn't get down. Let us out, do." "How many of you are there?" asked the keeper. "Only 4, said Cyril. "Are you armed?" "Are we what?" "I've got my gun handy, so you'd best not try any tricks," said the keeper. "If we open the door, would you promise to come quietly down and no nonsense?" "Yes, oh yes," said all the children together. "Bless me," said the vicar, "surely that was a female voice." "Shall I open the door, sir?" said the keeper. Andrew went down a few steps. "To leave room for the others," he said afterwards. "Yes," said the vicar, "open the door. Remember," he said through the keyhole, "we have come to release you. You will keep your promise to refrain from violence?" "How this bolt do stick," said the keeper. "Anyone would think it hadn't been drawed for half a year." As a matter of fact, it hadn't. When all the bolts were drawn, the keeper spoke deep-chested words through the keyhole. And here's where your picture is. "I don't open," said he. There you go. There's the keeper talking through the keyhole, and the vicar, I think, is now holding the lantern. There's the keeper's gun, and there's Andrew hiding down the stairs. I don't open, said he, till you've gone over to the other side of the tower. If one of you comes at me, I fire. Now. We're all over on the other side, said the voices. The keeper felt pleased with himself and owned himself a bold man when he threw open that door and, stepping out into the leads, flashed the full light of the stable lantern on the group of desperadoes standing against the parapet on the other side of the tower. He lowered his gun, and he nearly dropped the lantern. So help me, he cried, if they ain't a pack of kiddies. The vicar now advanced. How did you come here? He asked severely. Tell me at once. Oh, take us down, said Jane, catching at his coat, and we'll tell you anything you like. You won't believe us, but it doesn't matter. Oh, take us down. The others crowded round him with the same entreaty, all but Cyril. He had enough to do with the soda-water siphon, which would keep slipping down under his jacket. It needed both hands to keep it steady in its place, but he said, standing as far out of the lantern light as possible, Please do take us down. So they were taken down. It is no joke to go down a strange church tower in the dark, but the keeper helped them. Only Cyril had to be independent because of the soda-water siphon. It would keep trying to get away. Halfway down the ladder, it all but escaped. Cyril just caught it by its spout, and as nearly as possible lost his footing. He was trembling and pale when at last they reached the bottom of the winding stair and stepped out onto the stones of the church porch. Then suddenly the keeper caught Cyril and Robert, each by an arm. You bring along the girls, sir, he said. You and Andrew can manage 'em. Let go, said Cyril. We aren't running away. We haven't hurt your old church. Leave go. You just come along, said the keeper, and Cyril dared not oppose him with violence because just then the siphon began to slip again. So they were marched into the vicarage study, and the vicar's wife came rushing in. Oh, William, are you safe? She cried. Robert hastened to allay her anxiety. Yes, he said, he's quite safe. We haven't hurt them at all, and please, we're very late and they'll be anxious at home. Could you send us home in your carriage? Or perhaps there is a hotel near where you could get a carriage, said Anthea. Martha will be very anxious as it is. The vicar had sunk into a chair, overcome by emotion and amazement. Cyril had also sat down and was leaning forward with his elbows on his knees because of the soda-water siphon. So he's hiding it by leaning forward. But how did you come to be locked up in the tower? Hang on, sorry, just getting ready for the next one because I feel certain there's a next one. I think that's it, actually. We'll find out. We went up, said Robert slowly, and we were tired and we all went to sleep. And when we woke up, we found the door was locked. So we yelled. I should think you did, said the vicar's wife, frightening everybody out of their wits like this. You ought to be ashamed of yourselves. We are, said Jane. But who locked the door? Asked the vicar. I don't know at all, said Robert, with perfect truth. Do please send us home. Well, really, said the vicar, I suppose we'd better. Andrew, put the horse to, and you can take them home. Not alone, I don't, said Andrew to himself, and the vicar went on. Let this be a lesson to you, he went on talking, and the children listened miserably. But the keeper was not listening. He was looking at the unfortunate Cyril. He knew all about poachers, of course, so he knew how people look when they're hiding something. The vicar had just got to the part about trying to grow up to be a blessing to your parents and not a trouble and disgrace when the keeper suddenly said, Arst him, what he's got there under his jacket. And Cyril knew that concealment was at an end, so he stood up and squared his shoulders and tried to look noble, like the boys in books that no one can look in the face of and doubt that they come of brave and noble families, and will be faithful to the death. And he pulled out the siphon and said, Well, there you are then. There was a silence. Cyril went on. There was nothing else for it. Yes, we took this out of your larder and some chicken and tongue and bread. We were very hungry and we didn't take the custard or jam. We only took bread and meat and water, and we couldn't help its being soda kind, just the necessaries of life, and we left 1/2 crown to pay for it, and we left a letter, and we're very sorry, and my father will pay a fine and anything you like, but don't send us to prison. Mother would be so vexed. You know what you said about not being a disgrace. Well, don't you go and do it to us, that's all. We are as sorry as we can be. There. However did you get up to the larder window? Said Mrs. Vicar. I can't tell you that, said Cyril firmly. Is this the whole truth you've been telling me? Asked the clergyman. No, answered Jane suddenly. It's all true, but it's not the whole truth. We can't tell you that. It's no good asking. Oh, do forgive us and take us home. She ran to the vicar's wife and threw her arms round her. The vicar's wife put her arms round Jane, and the keeper whispered behind his hand to the vicar, They're all right, sir. I expect it's a pal they're standing by. Someone put him up to it, and they won't peach. Game little kids. Tell me, said the vicar kindly, are you screening someone else? Has anyone else anything to do with this? Yes, said Anthea, thinking of the Samiad. But it wasn't their fault. Very well, dears, said the vicar. Then let's say no more about it, only just tell us why you wrote such an odd letter. I don't know, said Cyril. You see, Anthea wrote it in such a hurry, and it really didn't seem like stealing then, but afterwards when we found we couldn't get down off the church tower, it seemed just exactly like it. We are all very sorry. Say no more about it, said the vicar's wife. But another time just think before you take other people's tongues. Now, some cake and milk before you go home? When Andrew came to say that the horse was put to, and was he expected to be led alone into the trap that he had plainly seen from the first, he found the children eating cake and drinking milk and laughing at the vicar's jokes. Jane was sitting on the vicar's wife's lap, so you see they got off better than they deserved. The gamekeeper, who was the cook's cousin, asked leave to drive home with them, and Andrew was only too glad to have someone to protect him from that trap he was so certain of. When the wagonette reached their own house between the chalk quarry and the gravel pit, the children were very sleepy, but they felt that they and the keeper were friends for life. Andrew dumped the children down at the iron gate without a word. You get along home, said the vicarage cook's cousin, who was a gamekeeper. I'll get me home on Shank's mare. So he's going to walk. Shank's pony or Shank's mare as your feet. So Andrew had to drive off alone, which he did not like at all, and it was the keeper that was cousin to the vicarage cook who went with the children to the door, and when they had been swept to bed in a whirlwind of reproaches, remained to explain to Martha and the cook and the housemaid exactly what had happened. He explained so well that Martha was quite amicable the next morning. After that he often used to come over and see Martha, and in the end, but that is another story, as dear Mr. Kipling says. Martha was obliged to stick to what she had said the night before about keeping the children indoors the next day for a punishment, but she wasn't at all ugly about it and agreed to let Robert go out for half an hour to get something he particularly wanted. This, of course, was the day's wish. Robert rushed to the gravel pit, found the Samiad, and presently wished for... But that, too, is another story. And that's the end of that chapter. And I am not reading the next one for you. I'm sorry. I don't care how much you beg for me to read it today. That will be next time. So there you go. Wow. Wings. Have you ever dreamt of flying? Have you had those dreams at night when you're asleep, especially when you're a child, of flying? And it was rather odd. You couldn't quite control it, although when you stopped trying, it seemed to work better. And then you knew when the dream was coming to an end because you felt like you were drifting down towards the ground and you didn't want to. You wanted to stay up in the air. Oh, that was such an odd feeling, but still quite intriguing. Anyway, we will see you next time. I do hope you're enjoying the story. I look forward to reading for you again next time.